Apparently in this video, I am going to be shown why gay marriage is making society fall apart.
Matt, the counter arguments they use are typically to cite exceptions. What they will do is they'll say, well, what about the elderly couple who gets married and they have no possibility of procreation? Or what about the infertile couple who gets married and they have no possibility of procreation? Well, realistically, society doesn't have all that much interest in whether old people get married to each other because they're not procreating. With that said, this is sort of like arguing that a dog does not have 4 legs definitionally because some dogs have 3 legs. That doesn't change the definition of marriage.
Right, exactly. It's still in principle, the man-woman union is procreative, and there are going to be exceptions based on old age or disease or whatever. But that doesn't change the fundamental definition.
First of all, to say that the only purpose for marriage is procreative, that viewpoint is nonsense, and that's one of the reasons why Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro are supposedly against gay marriage, is because they can't naturally have babies, and that's what marriage is for, after all. It's just for having babies, and that's it. I think that is a ludicrous viewpoint.
You know, if you're especially a younger couple and you get married and you find that you're not able to conceive children biologically, there are other ways to have kids. And I do think that, every married couple is called to some form of, every man, woman, married couple is called to some form of parenthood.
By who? Called by who? Every man, every woman is called to some form of parenthood. Called by who? Because last I checked, a lot of you folks on the right, definitely Ben Shapiro, you guys love to say that this gay marriage thing is not a religious issue. You also say that abortion is not a religious issue. Yet you say things like this: every woman, every man is in some way called to be a parent. Who calls you? Called by who?
And which is just another way of saying that none of us are called to live lives entirely centered around ourselves. And there are other ways to do that. And obviously adoption is one. And of course, the response to the other side is, well, then do I support 2 men adopting kids? And I don't. But the reason is that, again, children need a mother and a father. And it's best if they can have their own biological mother and father. That's not the way it works out in reality, though. And so if they can't have that, then another really good option is to have an adopted mother and father. But they still need both of those roles filled.
Children need a mother and a father. Well, Ben and Matt, millions and millions of children, not only in America, but worldwide, have a mother and a father. And guess what? Their mother and their father are extremely abusive. And this isn't a rare thing to live in a household of domestic violence, to live in a household of abuse. It's extremely common, way more common than gay marriage, for a child to be growing up watching his or her mommy get pulverized by an abusive husband. That's extremely common. And it's ludicrous to me that the biggest talking point right now for the Conservative Party when it comes to marriage is gay marriage. It's not what do we do to fix this rampant problem of women getting pulverized and sometimes killed. And the children watch this every day. Why is that not your focus? If you're focused on some aspect of marriage, some element of marriage being the downfall of society, why would you choose the gays for your pet problem here instead of the real problem when it comes to marriage, which is domestic violence? Probably because domestic violence isn't as much of an affront to your religion.
Filled. And a man simply cannot fill the role of a mother. And I know that, having kids myself, that I cannot be to my kids what my wife is, because I'm not a woman. I can't be their mother. I can be their father. And every child needs both.
Not if they're in a situation where the dad is pulverizing the mother. Then guess what? They need the dad to leave, or they need to leave their dad. And having their single mother is infinitely better than being in a household with, quote unquote, both parents. They need both. They need both. They need both. Not when they're in a household of abuse and one of the parents is constantly beating the other. They don't need that. It would be far better for society for those children to be raised even by two dads. It would be better for society if children who watch their moms getting pulverized every day, it would be far better for society for them to be growing up with a parent situation where they had a gay marriage and they have two dads. That's far better than they have both a mom and a dad, and the dad is pulverizing the mom every day. In some cases, the dads are pulverizing the kids every day too. But why not focus on that? Why are you focusing on the gays if you're so caught up on marriage being the source of either a good marriage or a bad marriage, and that's really what matters as far as a good society or a bad society? Why the hell are you focusing so much on the gays instead of domestic violence? I still don't understand that.
You know, one of the things that's happened here, Matt, is all of the redefinition of marriage. You know, again, everyone wants to make it about same-sex marriage, but it really isn't about same-sex marriage. It's really about the decline and fall of Western civilization. You undermine marriage.
The decline of Western civilization. It's not domestic violence. It's the gays.
What you end up with is people who are not actually maturing as human beings. You have endless adolescence. You have no procreation, no children. The West is now reproducing at well under replacement rates. The only Western country that is reproducing above replacement rates is actually Israel. That's the only one. That's because it is a very a culturally and religiously based tradition.
I mean, well, he's talking about religion. Whatever happened to this is not a religious issue. But do you blame women for not wanting necessarily to procreate when a lot of women don't want to bring in more children into a household of violence? This isn't rare. We're talking millions and millions of women being pulverized every day by abusive husbands. This is extremely common. Of course, they're not going to want to procreate and bring in more children into that type of environment. That would also, if you on the right started focusing more on domestic violence, again, if marriage is your big hobby horse, is your big high horse, if it's all about marriage, the state of a marriage is whether or not is the main factor in whether or not a society falls apart. Why focus on the gays? Focus on whether it's abortion, because you'll reduce abortion a lot too if you can help fix this problem of domestic violence.
There are wide differences, by the way, within Western civilization among religious believers, right? Religious believers are still getting married. They are still having kids. They are still not getting divorced nearly as often. People who are not religious are not getting married. What you're seeing, this has an impact politically, actually. You're seeing a rising voting bloc in the United States. The rising voting bloc is single women. Single women are an increasing percentage of the American population. They voted overwhelmingly for the Democrats, and they voted on the basis, presumably, of a couple of actual policies. One is more government largesse, which makes sense. If you don't have a partner, then having the government provide some support makes some sense. And two, abortion, because again, what you want to be able to do is not be, quote unquote, saddled with a child, the way that Barack Obama talked about his daughters being, quote unquote, punished with a child. Well, as we as a society move away from the idea that men have a duty to produce and then defend their children, and that women have a duty to bear and rear their children, and that this is how society functions. As we move away from that, it shouldn't be a surprise that society is falling apart.
Yeah, it's not.
Society is falling apart because traditional marriage is being eschewed, apparently. Society is falling apart because people are walking away more and more from traditional marriage. Again, mentioning abortion now. So if you're so concerned about the fetuses and you're so concerned about birth rates, why don't you folks on the right start focusing more on fixing the problem of women getting killed and women getting pulverized and the children watching this helplessly by the millions and the millions and millions? It's just very common, extremely common. Focus on that if you're so concerned about abortion rates, because women will be far more apt to bring in more babies into their households when they know that their husbands are providing for them and loving them and gentle towards them and protecting them. Of course, a woman would want to bring in, more women would want to bring babies into such loving and wonderful households. Of course, fewer women would want to abort their babies if they knew that they weren't going to bring more children into a household of violence and a household of danger. You folks on the right are focusing on the wrong thing, because the problem is not gay marriage.
And that's why there are a lot of consequences, as you point out. I mean, the collapse of civilization happens, and that's much more important than the political consequences.
Unbelievable.
But as far as politics go,
unbelievable.
This is one of the reasons why Republicans are quite foolish to give up on the battle for marriage, and then by extension.
So they're foolish. Republicans are foolish for giving up on the battle for marriage. Well, they apparently, I don't hear a lot of people talking on YouTube or elsewhere about this problem of domestic violence. Apparently they gave up on that. But now Matt Walsh doesn't want them to give up on the gay issue. I guess it's fine for those on the right to not be so obsessed with trying to fix this problem of battered women and this problem with domestic violence. I guess they don't think it's so important for children to be in loving households that they devote hours and hours and hours to try to sway people away from battering your wives. But boy, don't you Republicans ever give up on this gay marriage stuff, because that's really super important. And you guys are fools, according to Matt Walsh, for giving up on this battle about gay marriage. It's unbelievable.
Giving up, foolish to give up on the battle for marriage, and then by extension giving up on the battle for the family, because along with civilization collapsing, also the Republican Party is going to collapse a lot sooner than that.
Stop.
You're making yourself irrelevant, because single people are much more susceptible to the machinations of the Democrat Party and leftism.
Oh, who cares?
Much more easy to manipulate. And
you guys on the right are becoming irrelevant if you don't start bashing this whole gay marriage thing. You guys are just going to fade away on the right. Our party is going to fade away if we don't keep bashing this gay marriage thing. To hell with the real problems of society, like domestic violence. Screw all of that. No, we have to go after the gays and their desire to redefine marriage and their desire to have the same type of recognition and relationship as anyone else in the world. That's what you guys have to go after if you want your beloved party to not fade away. It's absolutely ridiculous.
And a lot of that is because, if you have a child and you're not married, then you're much more likely to see that as a crisis. Whereas if you're married, then you have the structure in place. Even if you weren't planning on having a kid, even if you feel like you're not ready for it, you have the structure in place to care for the child.
No, you don't, Matt. For millions and millions of women, their structure that's in place for having babies is a structure of violence, a structure of being battered, a structure of destruction. Why would a woman want to bring children into that structure? You guys on the right have this privileged viewpoint, this unrealistic viewpoint that if you just everyone's called to marriage, every woman and every man is called to marriage. You need to have more and more marriages, and you have to produce more and more babies, and then society will be better, and then we'll work out all those little other minor kinks like domestic violence. What an unrealistic and privileged viewpoint.
And that's,
I say privileged because Ben Shapiro grew up in a wonderful household. Ben Shapiro's parents loved him as a child. I've heard some interviews with him. I don't know much about Matt Walsh, but let's just say he's in the same boat. He had great parents, let's just say. He had a loving childhood, let's just say. He had a great education, I'm assuming here. I don't know if he's college educated, but let's just assume he is. He had all of these wonderful institutions around him in his childhood, I imagine. And two parents and grandparents and people around him that were loving. And so this gave Matt and Ben a certain viewpoint, a privileged viewpoint about what reality is. So now they're fighting for everyone to have their childhoods. I'm glad they had great childhoods, but the reality is different for millions and millions and millions of children who watch their moms get pulverized every day. They have a very privileged point of view, and they're barking up the wrong tree. They're focusing on the wrong problems. It ain't gay marriage, guys, that you should be focusing on.
That's why we cannot give up on this issue. And if Republicans give up on it, then they've given up on themselves. They've given up on their own political future.
They've given up on their political future if they just lay down and roll over and let the mean old steamroller of gay marriage just steam right over them. What a bunch of fear-mongering over an issue that, quite frankly, is a non-issue. I'm not quite sure why society falls apart if we allow gay people to get married. Why is society falling apart because of that? I mean, because they don't produce enough children? Guess what, guys? If gay people didn't get married, they're still not going to produce children. So what is your point? You want to know what's bad for society? Women who are pulverized and can't go to work, or if they do go to work, they don't give their best. That's not good for society. When you're not a very good member of society because you're walking around scared with bruises all over your face and broken ribs, you are not functioning fully. You're functioning in fear, and you're cowering because you're afraid of what's happening to you the second you step back into that threshold of your house. I mean, healthcare bills rise, productivity lowers when millions and millions and millions of women are not functioning at their best, and millions of children are cowering in schools. They can't think properly. They're not giving their attention in school because of their battered lives, because of their domestic violence that they're around every single day. That is a danger to society. Stuff like that. And that's only with a marriage issue. I'm not even talking about the other problems with society that we have right now that we need to iron out. This is just the marriage issue.
Yeah, Matt, I think there's another thing that's happening too, and that is that in the absence of definitions and reality and frankly God, in the absence of all of those things,
they keep mentioning God. They can't stop mentioning God. On one side of their mouth, this has nothing to do with God, they say. Ben Shapiro and others on the right. These issues of abortion has nothing to do with God. The issue of gay marriage has nothing to do with God. Yet they always bring it up.
What you end up with is a belief that the government is God and simply can redefine reality at whim, which is why
you're not redefining reality. Marriage is not, some objective reality. Marriage is something that we make up. Humanity makes marriage up. It's not, you can't see it under a microscope. Like reality, black holes are reality. You can't redefine a black hole. You can't redefine math because that's reality. That's 2 + 2 is going to equal 4. You cannot redefine that. But marriage, of course, we define it. That's made up. We created marriage, us humans. We can define it any way we want to define it. There have been marriages throughout history where it was defined as a man marrying many wives. That there's one made up definition of marriage. It's when a man marries many, many wives, and those wives are now bound to that man, like some concubine or something. And then there's been marriage has been defined as having nothing to do with, love. It was more for political purposes, political peace. So I'm going to marry the daughter of some political enemy of mine to show that we are now allies. There's been all kinds of ways that marriage has been defined by human beings. We made it. It's just like words. The word gay used to mean happy and or blissful. Now it means something else. Words are made up. Words have meaning because we use these words in certain ways and they become part of our common lexicon. Same with marriage. Marriage is made up. We make up those rules and then everyone follows that societal norm after humans make it up. It's like the rules of football. They're made up. I mean, there's an objective way to play the game after we make up those rules. And now to win a game, you have to play by these rules or chess. Same with marriage. It's made up. There's no definition that we have to follow. But we can see this definition of marriage under a microscope. We can see this definition under a lab. That's not how it works. We make this stuff up, Ben. So change it to accommodate everybody.
You now have all of those things. What you end up with is a belief that the government is God and simply can redefine reality at whim, which is why you now have the belief, look, no matter what bill the government passes, or no matter what Supreme Court decision is made, suggesting that marriage is actually between any two consenting adults, marriage is not between any two consenting adults. It just isn't. I mean, it's like if the Supreme Court made a decision tomorrow declaring that the color blue is yellow, Well, they can make that decision, and we can.
That's ridiculous. Blue is blue for reasons. It's the way light reflects off of things. That's science. That is not something that we just randomly, subjectively make up. You can't compare marriage with colors. You can't compare marriage with mathematics. You can't compare marriage to anything that's objective, like colors, because marriage isn't objective. We make it up. It's subjective.
Build all of our laws around that silliness, but it does not reflect reality. And eventually,
there is a reality. So marriage is some reality that we just discovered, apparently. Like, we had one day a man discovered marriage as if it's some scientific law. No, we make it up. This is gibberish. This is nonsense.
reality is going to have a say here. And in fact, it's not eventual. It already is having a say as marriage completely collapses and implodes and people don't have kids. We have perennial adolescence and the idea that
marriage is not collapsing, Ben. Marriage is not imploding. The melodrama of these people. The melodrama. Nothing is collapsing because of the gays. You idiots.
adults are atomistic individuals who ought to be pursuing their own hedonistic pleasure until they die.
No. It's a good thing to pursue your pleasures. It doesn't mean that you're going to make society collapse. If people are pursuing what they want to be in life, what they want to become, what jobs they want to make them happy, and they go to school because they want to be a lawyer, or they want to be a cop, or they want to be a fireman, or they want to be a pizza delivery guy or girl, or they want to start a business and be an entrepreneur. If you're pursuing your own thing, that doesn't mean you're some hedonist who's just in it for just some selfish hedonist. No, you're still good for society. How you make your money, how you work, how you choose to live your life can be exceptionally good for society, because you are, even if you don't like people that much, if you love what you do and you have a good job and your job is serving some market out there, like you're a cop, you're protecting the peace, you're an entrepreneur, you're filling some gap in the market. You flip burgers at McDonald's, you're serving a need. You're good for society, even if you're living your life however you want. It's not because you're some selfish, atomistic, hedonistic. You're not useless just because you are living how you want. People who live how they want can be extremely good for society if they're happy, if they are productive.
Yeah, and this is
that adults are atomistic individuals who ought to be pursuing their own hedonistic pleasure until
absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, and this is, so when people ask, why does it matter if there's quote unquote gay marriage? How does it affect you? Is the question that Rogan asked several times when we were talking about it. And this is the effect right here, is that it makes it makes marriage
What's the effect?
Pointless in the minds of so many people. And in fact, Rogan said himself that it's sort of silly. It makes it seem like a silly, useless, pointless thing if marriage is not.
I mean, these guys are worried that gay people marrying each other are going to make society think that marriage is pointless. Like, that's the worst thing the worst scenario that they could come up with in their heads for society is a bunch of people are going to think marriage is silly or pointless. Not that millions of women are getting battered, millions of children are watching this violence, and that there's PTSD involved with domestic violence. Children aren't focusing in school because of domestic violence because all they can think of is their poor mommies getting beat, or they themselves getting beat. A lot of kids get beat too. And so they're not functioning properly in society. They're not functioning in school. And then they grow up and they're not as good with their jobs, and they're not as good with the relationships, and they're not as good for society. Like, that's not you guys' concern, huh? It's, oh no, people are going to think marriage is silly if the gays get married. Ludicrous. Stupid.
Not fundamentally procreative, then what's the point of it? And then
Who cares?
What do you have?
Who cares?
You have, younger people especially, who they pick up that message, they hear that loud and clear, and they say, well, there's no why get married? There's no point. And then you see the collapse of the family and everything else.
The
that comes
collapse
along
of the family.
Alrighty, guys. The rest of the show is continuing.
I guess that's it. I can't. It's domestic violence that you guys should be focusing on, because that will keep society in the well-being of society intact far more than you folks preventing gay people. All preventing gay people from getting married, all that's going to do is make gay people angry and miserable that they don't get to have the same kind of recognition. Their relationship status doesn't get to be recognized and official the way heterosexual couples' relationships do through their marriage. All you're going to do is you're going to make people miserable. You're going to make millions of men and women who can't get married miserable and not be as productive in society. If you want a productive society, you have to let individuals do what they want, be who they want, pursue happiness the way they please. The way to make a good society is for everybody to be healthy and happy and fulfilled and become who they want to become and pursue their happiness as they see fit, just like the Declaration of Independence says. Then they will be productive members in the workforce, or they'll become great entrepreneurs, or they might discover great things as scientists because they're happy and they are learned and they focus on their education and they focus on their jobs and they focus on society and doing their part and living lives as they see fit to be fulfilled and happy. The way to have a better society or to keep our society afloat is not to say you can't get married and you can't get married and you can't get married. That's ludicrous. That's not how to do it. Nor is it to force a woman to remain pregnant against her will and bring a baby bring yet another baby into an abusive, violent household. These are not the ways to help society.